This illustration deals with entrance to and egress from the working space in accordance with 110.26, C is in car 1 and C is in car 2. Now, a few additions back of the code, they addressed egress from the working space too. For a long time, it was just entrance. The panel felt like, well, if you could enter in, you ought to be able to get out. Well, they found there were some installations where, yeah, they could enter, but if something went wrong, they had a problem getting out. The egress path was blocked. So, for example of this rule requirement, look at the very top of the illustration, to the left, the workspace. Let's just say that that electrical equipment was 12 foot wide. In the center, you have 6 foot each way. So if I'm working to the left, an arc for some reason developed to the right in the equipment, I have no object anywhere blocking my path. My escape path there is wide open. There's nothing to block it. And notice one thing. Many inspectors that I have talked to through the years use 6 foot as a travel in and out from electrical equipment. Now, this is what they use. It doesn't necessarily say that in the code, but the 6 foot's kind of suggested, depending on which code you're using. But notice the one to the right now. Say that entering in through that door, safe entry. Now, say the same thing. We have a 12 foot wide piece of equipment, 6 foot toward the top of the equipment, no entry. It's just a bus there, totally enclosed. There's no removable covers, no energized components to work on. But down to the bottom of that 6 foot of the 12, yeah, we have workspace, we remove covers, all that kind of thing. Now, if a fault developed into the top portion of that equipment, you notice I'm not traveling through 6 foot of gear or anything. I'm just right out of there. But again, I point out the 6 foot doesn't necessarily say that has to be provided, but that's a good rule of thumb to use. Now let's look at the illustration in the bottom that can create all kinds of problems. If we had the 2 doors, as you see in that illustration, and once again, notice the equipment is 12 foot wide, so where the arrows in the center were 6 foot each way. Well, the equipment is over 12 foot wide, so condition 1 has been met. If the bus is 1200 amps or more, then the condition 2 has been met, if it's a continuous bus. But also now in the 2020 NEC, say there's the divider of that bus, a barrier where the arrow is, and you had a different energized bus to the right than the left, and you had, say, 900 amps in the left side, well, the 2020 NEC said, no, that's not required to be large equipment because the bus is not 1200 amps or more continuous. Now you would take the 900 amps, and if you had, say, 800 amps in the right-hand side, they add together and they're above 1200 amps, then even though the bus is not continuous, but the 2 mains add up to 1200 amps or more, then we would need the 2 doors as you see. Now let's look at this situation. Say that the door to the left is a wall. You can't get out there. Then if I was working to the left, a fault developed in the right side, I'd be traveling through more than 6 foot of gear to get out of there. Now, good is a good rule of thumb that's prohibited. If you're large equipment, you would double the workspace. Now we go back to those conditions 1, 2, or 3. You're evaluating condition 1 is at an insulated wall. Condition 2, it'd be a grounded wall. Condition 3, it would be a equipment opposite equipment. So there'd be equipment on that wall opposite that switchgear. But since That's not the case, we'll say. We're just dealing with condition 1, the wall's insulated, and you only need 3 foot. You would double that space to 6 foot. And the concept, you know, that the code takes, I think, is that if a fault developed to the left while I was I'm working in the left-hand side, a fault developed to the right-hand side, and an arc developed and blinded me, for example, I could get on the wall, nothing's on there, see, no equipment, and I could feel my way down that wall to that door to get out of there till my eyes started gaining vision again from that flash. So it's either 2 doors or double the workspace if that equipment falls under large equipment. What's the rule now? First condition, it's got to be over 6 foot wide with a continuous bus, or have 2 discontinued buses, but the mains add up to 1,200 amps or more, then it's considered large equipment. So 2 conditions have to be present for the equipment to be considered large. So you'd say, well, now what if I had a 12-foot width of equipment, but I only had 900 amps of mains? Then it's not large equipment. You have to have both at 1,000 volts or less, and that's what figure 5-7 is illustrating. I need an entry to the equipment, but I also need a safe egress from the workspace, and that is defined to us so that we understand this when we review the requirements of 110.26C1 and C2 as in car outlined in the NEC 2020 edition.